So, our next speaker will continue this theme of practical approaches to managing the Nexus, this time from the food sector perspective. I'd like to introduce Doug McNicholl, Program Manager, Environment and Sustainability with the Australian Meat Processor Corporation. Doug is responsible for the development and implementation of R&D programs that deliver environmental and sustainability outcomes for the Australian red meat processing industry. He's also been involved in research undertaken by the Advanced Water Management Centre at the University of Queensland around new generation wastewater treatment technology for the meat processing industry. Doug, thank you.
Thank you. Hello everybody, thanks to the Australian Water Association for allowing me the opportunity to be here. I'm probably the standout in the room in terms of my broad country outback Queensland accent, and Ivan's already at the back of the Olia picked that up pretty quickly. Thanks for that, Ivan. So I'm bringing to today's discussion, what I would hope to bring to today's discussion is a practical view around industry use of energy and water and what that means in the context of red meat processing industry. A bit of a snapshot about the industry for those of you who don't understand it. We are Australia's largest food manufacturer and exporter. We generate annually 16.2 billion in GDP and 7.6 billion in household income and 5.8 billion in exports and just under 150,000 full-time equivalent jobs. The majority of those are in semi-regional and rural areas, which is where I'm based. Heavily export dependent, so in excess of 60% of product produced is exported. It's a high volume and a low margin industry. About 3 to 4% gross operating surplus is typical in a long-term average. And the top 5 red meat processing businesses account for around 50% of national production. A little bit about MPC, the corporate spiel continues. We're one of the 14 national research and development corporations, not for profit. We're 50% industry levy funded, 50% match funded by the federal government, so taxpayers. Our remit is to provide research, development, training and extension services to the red meat processing industry. Our partner RDC, which is Meat and Livestock Australia, service the needs of on-farm, which is the production side of red meat, which is cattle, sheep, goats, and other red meats. Our remit is post-farm gate, so what happens when they enter the processing facility. There's a clear distinction there. Put our two funding bodies together, we represent about, in the order of, $220 million worth of research annually in the red meat industry. And one of the key messages, as I mentioned yesterday, and again I'd like to mention today, is that we are a research corporation. Our remit is to fund research, and those of you that are involved in the association and looking at technology and innovation in water and or energy, certainly in a food processing context, we'd really like to hear from you. I know Marguerite has previously been involved with some research with MPC. So researchers, tech companies, state government bodies, industry groups that are interested in co-investing, we'd certainly like to hear from you. There are 5 main core programs that AMPC administers its $20 million research budget through annually. The first of those is technology and processing, which is a key area around what happens within the processing facility, automation and robotics predominantly. Environment and sustainability, which is my background, and that spans things like natural resource consumption, greenhouse gas emissions mitigation, but also this emerging area around, I use the term carefully, certification, but understanding best practice in environmental stewardship is certainly another area that I'm involved in. Food safety and product integrity and meat science. There's no point being environmentally efficient in utilising water, in particular if you're compromising your core business, which is food safety. So that's another key area of research. Implementation, extension and training and education, keeping staff informed in industry employees informed around research and how they can do their jobs better, keeping them continually across training requirements. And then industry improvement and economic analysis, which is looking at things like new market opportunities, marketing activities, and overall industry improvement. Now to the crux of the issue for today's presentation at least. This is just an indication of the sources of water which red meat processing facilities utilise nationally. I'd like to make a point that the survey data here is from an environmental sustainability review, which we try and undertake at an industry level every 2 to 3 years. This data is from 2010, so it's a little bit outdated, but we do have CSIRO currently working on our current review. About 26 respondents across our national member base of about 156 businesses or thereabouts. It changes at any point in time, but still it's relevant. So about 83% of facilities across nationally draw water from town water, 10% from bore water and 7% from irrigation water. There's some other sources there, or it could be any combination of those sources. This slide's a bit of a foreign speak to some of you, but the purpose is it just gives you a bit of an indication of where water is consumed within the red meat processing sector. Again, this is off-farm, so there's a clear distinction between what happens off-farm and what happens within the processing facility. But anywhere between 40 to 60% of the water is used in the process of slaughter and evisceration, which is the slicing and dicing of animals, to put it more crudely, but so people understand what that means. 7 to 38% is used in edible and inedible offal processing. So that's things like offal that's for human consumption versus offal that goes to things like pet food. 9 to 20% in casings processing, and anywhere between 7 to 24% in stockyard at the top, which is just preparing animals for processing. So for those of you that were at all interested in that, you now have some informed opinion. This slide shows the raw water use per kilolitre per tonne of hot standard carcass weight. Now, hot standard carcass weight is a tonne of meat as it exits the facility. To give you a bit of another viewpoint on that, it's about 4 animals per tonne of hot standard carcass weight, 4 beef carcasses. It gives you a bit of another way of looking at it. You can see that from 1978 to 2012, there's been a dramatic decrease in the water use intensity. Noting this is an intensity figure and not a holistic figure. A dramatic decrease, but also an increase in the range, because what you're seeing is an increase in variation across processing type. You're seeing larger facilities that are becoming more efficient, but so you'll end up with a lower water use intensity figure at the bottom. This is on the 2012 figures I'm referring to, sorry. But you also see some facilities that still use quite a significant amount of water, and that represents things like location, the cost of the water, the disposal cost of the water, and the age of the infrastructure and the processes that take place. But that just gives you a bit of an idea. There's some average figures there. Some additional dot points in relation to water use. In 2012, CSIRO, as well as ourselves, undertook a survey of 23 sites. The survey went out nationally. We had 23 respondents. The smaller plants used on average 2.82 kilolitres of water per tonne of hot standard carcass weight processed, and larger plants that were mainly registered for export. So you can see a dramatic increase or a significant increase in the amount of water that's used in order to comply with the, international export requirements around food safety. An important take-home message here is that we could, as an industry, dramatically reduce the amount of water we use if consumers would allow us to use recycled water on food product. It's a cultural issue. It's probably a challenge for consumers. There's nothing we can do about that. Well, nothing we can do about it. We can certainly educate people. We're certainly willing to do it, but it's a consumer-led angle. The purchase cost of water, including pre-treatment, varies between zero, if it's coming from available water sources in a regional area, for example, to up to $3.46 per kilolitre, and that's mains water incoming. And slightly outdated, this is from 2012, but gives you a range of costings there. This slide just demonstrates, we've already touched on this, so I won't dwell on it, there's been a significant increase in the cost of water across all the municipalities nationally from 1994 up to 2013. So there's a strong commercial imperative to reduce consumption. This slide just demonstrates in technical terms, so unfortunately I apologise for those of you this is a bit foreign to, but the purpose is just to demonstrate where the cost of treating, heating and disposing of water lies within a typical red meat processing facility. And the two examples are whether you're discharging to sewer on the immediate middle column, whether you're discharging to surface water. This is for a facility that's actually in Queensland, and if you're referring to the middle column, it's tapped into mains water, processing in the order of 1,100 cattle per day. The purchase cost is $3.50 per kilolitre, and this is more current than the $3.46 I had from 2012. It costs about 45 cents a kilolitre to heat that water to between 30, should be 30 degrees C, not 30%, to 82, depending upon what the use of the water is. Wastewater treatment costs about 7 cents per kilolitre, and that excludes things like labour and sludge disposal. Pumping is anywhere between, usually about 30 cents per kilolitre, and wastewater discharge could be up to $1. And obviously, it's free if you're discharging to land. With in some instances, facilities would utilise their wastewater to irrigate crops to feed animals that are in lairage to their facilities. So, very little resource goes to waste. I can assure you, it's all used for one purpose or another. And the bottom two rows just demonstrate that the true cost in 2002 was a hell of a lot less than it is today, a fraction of the cost. Just wanted to educate you in terms of the water reuse options that are currently ongoing in industry. Of the respondents from the 2012 survey with CSIRO, 61% replaced potable water in regulatory approved arrangements in processes such as stockyard washing, initial tripe washing, cooling applications and boiler feed water, so the non-food product contact areas. 7% recycle within the same process. So there's obviously a number of processes that go on within the facilities. So if you recycle within process, you avoid contamination in some instances, or the majority of instances. 69% irrigate on site, 30% irrigate off site, so to an off-take agreement to a third party. And as I've mentioned, the technology exists to recycle all this stuff, and we could use it all again if consumers and regulators would allow us to. So that's a challenge for people to get over the fact that we should not use recycled water. Moving to energy, and I've got 3 minutes, so I'll work through these as efficiently as I can. The main sources of energy within this is again a respondent of a representative sample of industry, but again gives you an indication. About 37% of industry use natural gas. Electricity accounts for about 31%. Coal about 20%. That's predominantly in Queensland. The southern states and the western states use mostly natural gas. Biofuels are 6%, and other sources is 8%. Couldn't give you the detail of that 8% though, unfortunately. Major areas of energy consumption. The key point of this slide is that a huge energy consumer is the rendering aspect of meat processing, where you're melting down fats and wastes into things like tallows and soaps, pet food products, etc. So if you're carrying out rendering on site, you're going to use a hell of a lot more steam and require a hell of a lot more steam and hot water than other non-rendering facilities. Refrigeration accounts for about 30% of electricity consumption. Don't know how I did that. 30% of electricity consumption in non-rendering facilities. So that's where we focus area of attention is refrigeration and processed steam and hot water generation. This slide demonstrates that energy use intensity per tonne of hot standing carcass weight across industry on average has been largely the same since 1998. We are seeing a reduction in recent times, and we have a target of reducing energy consumption per tonne of hot standing carcass weight by 2015, which is relative to 2012. And the information which we'll collect from CSIRO, which should hopefully be available in March, will reflect that. In some ways I've covered this already, but there are a range of factors that influence energy consumption and resource consumption. Whether you're slaughtering, whether you're boning, whether you're producing retail ready meat, different facilities have different processing capacities and different processing configurations, so that all factors into your overall energy consumption. Things like species mix as well, age and throughput. Energy costs within industry. The larger facilities in Australia will spend anywhere upwards of $1 million on energy, and the smaller end will be anywhere up to $100,000 per annum. So, depending upon whether you're an energy manager at the biggest facility in Australia or not, you've got some room to play there, or a budget to play with in terms of looking at energy saving initiatives. And this is my final slide. These are some of the key areas in which we investigate, we trial technology, we run feasibility studies, and we test innovation. Things as efficient lighting, voltage reduction, alternative energy is a big area. In the last 2 to 3 years, there's been $80 to $100 million of investment, public and private sector investment into wastewater treatment and methane capture and reuse from abattoirs. And that's been a big area of investment for us. Heat recovery, efficient refrigeration, lighting controls, heat distribution and usage, and operating maintenance and controls. So there's a lot for us to cover, and I can assure you that we're certainly looking at all those areas. So any of you tech companies out there that are spruiking some interesting stuff, please get in contact. We'd really dearly like to get you involved in our industry. There are my contact details.
Doug, thank you. An excellent presentation, a presenter with some very good ideas on the way forward and some money. So what more could you want?